Good morning, everybody. My name is Don Anderson. I am chair for the East Long Meadow Planning Matters Subcommittee. We're opening our meeting today on September 23rd at 10:36 a.m. The format for today's meeting is going to be relatively a work meeting. It's just going to, we have some bullet points we want to cover, but we're going to try to work line by line through the proposed mixed-use zoning district by our zoning bylaw that was presented to us by the East Long Meadow Planning Board. We have a quorum here. We have all 5 members. We have 2 members in the audience as well. Everybody signed into the sign-up sheet, so without any further ado, let's start working on the list. Everybody have a working copy of this? All right. All right, let's take a look. Right off the bat, let's go for the name. All right, I'm on page 2 of 7.
Mr. Chair, just a quick question. We've received our draft minutes from our last meeting, which we haven't had a really
No, we're not going to be voting.
But,
yes.
And we've also received a document from Attorney Jane Monaleski, which perhaps might influence decisions that we might make today.
So you want to take a moment or two to read it?
No, it's too long. The point I'm saying is that if there's anything that we find, we can highlight, and then nothing's carved in stone.
No, absolutely not.
Other than just the votes that can be revisited if we need to.
Right.
Because I want to give her the courtesy of the effort that she put into her document.
And she may have an addendum to her comments for the next meeting, whenever that's scheduled.
Exactly. Okay. All right.
All right.
Sorry. Thank you.
No, don't sorry, not anything. All right. So let's take a look at the schedule. Use this table 3-1 zoning map. Special description, general description. Where am I starting with this? I have so many highlights. All right. On page 1 is just simply the request and the copy of the vote from the planning board. I don't think there's any comments or anything on that area.
Actually, there is.
There is. What do you have, Ralph?
I'd like to make sure that this is broken down into 2 separate. What appears is that the planning board has submitted us 2 separate items.
Mm-hmm.
One is a bylaw for a mixed-use district, which I think we should concentrate on.
That's all we're focusing on today.
Then the second one down the road will be, if that goes through, will be a map change, a zoning map change.
That is correct.
So we're separating this out, and it'll be different than what's
Right.
been given to us.
Right. We'll be looking at the map change in the future, provided this gets to that point.
And actually, the document that will ultimately go back before the council needs to reflect one item only, and that would be the bylaw, which is a requirement of the charter.
Right.
So
the focus of this is strictly going to be on the bylaw.
Correct.
And so people are clear that the table, that includes the table of uses, or no?
Oh, yes.
Yes.
Oh, yes,
Okay.
absolutely.
But the zoning map will be for the future?
Correct.
Okay.
Right.
All right.
So we want to start at the top. I mean, on the first page, it has request.
Mm-hmm.
I would just make a comment that the last line, it says, in commercial uses that meets the needs of, it says current and future residents.
Right.
I think we should look to change that to meets the needs of the town of East Long Meadow.
Should we add all town of East Long Meadow both now and in the future? Or just simply town
Make
of
that
East Long Meadow?
self-explanatory.
You think it's
Exactly. The needs of the town of East Long Meadow. I would.
Simply? Okay. Everybody on board with this?
Yep.
All right. Any other changes on page 1 of 7? Or comments? All right, now page 2 of 7, we have definition. It says the planning board proposes to amend section 8 definitions to include the definition of mixed-use development and a definition for recreation. Now we have their comments say mixed-use development, a development consisting of a mixture of residential, commercial, and business uses, and building types including single-family dwellings, townhouses, multifamily dwellings with or without business or commercial spaces, business and commercial buildings, recreational and open space. Recreation is an activity that people engage in during their free time that people enjoy and that people recognize as having socially redeeming values, and that was picked up, that last portion, by the Park and Recreation Professionals Handbook. Any changes or comments on that?
You're up.
Okay, well, you know, as a disclosure, Ralph and I looked at this together.
Yeah. Yep.
And spent a lot of time trying to make it as user-friendly as possible. And the issue about recreation, because we were discussing spaces, commercial spaces, business and commercial buildings, we initially thought about recreational facility and open space. The definition of recreation beneath it basically defines just what people do with their free time. And we don't have any problems with that. We were just looking as to land use within the mixed use, and that's why we were focusing on a recreation facility and open space. The definition of recreation is going to happen regardless. I mean, it's there. That's why it's quality of life issues. We don't have any problem with that, but that was our focus at the time. Now, I'd love to discuss it if people interpret it differently as to what recreation.
Well, most people, a lot of people, they feel like free time is when they're at work too, so.
Hi, Connie.
Is that why that, Marilyn, is that why that was struck?
Why we crossed out the definition,
Yeah.
just because we felt that we were dealing with land use more so than individuals' lifestyle.
Yeah.
But it's not a huge issue for either one of us, I would say.
So, Don, just to jump in our current bylaw, recreation facility definition is a place designed and equipped for the conduct of sports, leisure time activities, and other customary and usual recreational activities.
So what about recreation open space? Let's say they want to put a ball field, hypothetically. Would that be considered a facility, or a facility is more of a structure? Do we want to encourage recreational open space, like bike, areas designed for recreational outdoor activities that aren't a building?
Open space is, in my opinion, is a different category. It's
Correct.
open
Right.
space.
But we're
The
looking at adding the
recreation
word
facility
facility.
would come, that type of use I would think would come within that component.
Again, once we go back to our definitions, we have recreational facility commercial also, which is a different definition. That's a recreation facility operated as a business and open to the public for a fee.
All right.
So, I think what we're talking about here is, like you said, if you have a field that the kids can play in, stuff like that, no big deal. If you go to a sports stadium, a hockey stadium, something on that idea, then that changes the whole definition of it.
And that particular comment that Ralph just made will come up again when we talk about the table of uses, because there is an item in there that would invite that kind of a use.
All right, so what we're hearing here is after the word recreation under mixed-use development, add the word facility?
Yes.
Okay. So the way it would read is a development consistent of a mixture of residential, commercial and business uses and building types, including single-family dwellings, townhouses, multi-family dwellings with or without business or commercial space, business and commercial buildings, recreation facility, and open space.
And that's it.
Okay.
Strike out the definition.
Add the
Yes.
word facility, and then strike out the definition.
And by adding that, that's not requiring that they have this, any development.
It's allowing it.
It's allowing.
Well, we don't want to put them in multiple places, as Ralph indicated. We already
Yeah.
have it listed, so now if we change it one place, we have to try to
Right.
figure out where we need to change it.
Okay. Now, just within that as well, and this will come up again,
Yep.
is we're talking about multifamily dwellings with or without business or commercial space. Can we just focus on that sentence and thoughts on that? My first thought on it is multifamily dwellings. Are we also talking about, which I think we need in the future, a little sidebar there, is maybe in-law, are we talking about in-law apartments Or what do we mean by multifamily dwellings? Are we thinking
How
of the
about an
typical two?
apartment building?
All right, so, but,
Multifamily dwelling.
We have two definitions of multifamily dwellings in our bylaw based on what I suggested at the last meeting. One of them is in the definitions, section 8, and the other one is within, I believe, planned unit residential development. And they are different, and my suggestion, and I felt that it was more suitable to go with the definition that's in the general definitions. It's not as restrictive, the general definitions, as the planned adult residential definition. Do you have it, Ralph?
No.
Okay.
all right, so.
It's under dwelling.
So keep the understanding will be the multifamily dwelling as currently defined?
Okay. Multifamily dwelling, this is in section 8 of the zoning bylaws definitions. A building containing at least 2 dwelling units with separate sleeping, cooking, and sanitary facilities. The other definition limits it to, I believe, 6 per building.
Okay.
And I felt that, because we don't know what the design of any of these developments will be, and I felt that was too restrictive. So if you reference section 8 of the zoning bylaw definition, I think that would work for me.
And the other part that I'm just trying to get some clarity on is it goes with or without business or commercial spaces. Does that open and thoughts on that, with or without business or commercial spaces? And it seems to be focusing on the multifamily dwellings.
It took us, well,
yeah.
it took me a few minutes to figure it out, and I understand, I believe what the concept is, that when you have a development, you may have on the streetscape, you may have a first floor commercial, second, third floor residential, but in the back you may just have strictly residential. And as long as the ratio of commercial to residential is met within the project, it doesn't require, I would assume, that all buildings have to have commercial within the structure, that it can be just a residential piece. You'll have condos, you may have townhomes. So that's how I understand what that means.
So by adding the word after the word without, add the word attached, would that create a little more clarity without somebody saying, well, it seems here you can have without any type of business in here? Just want to make sure we're clear. I think we all know what the
No,
understanding is.
I understand, because
Know
we
what the
did,
intent is.
Yeah, so
Multifamily dwelling.
without attached business or commercial spaces. So you can have a multifamily dwelling as a standalone, yet as long as the overall district or use is the commercial and residential ratios match. But you can also have buildings without attached business or commercial spaces.
Do we need to say that here?
I think it might, I just hate to have somebody trying to argue
Yeah.
the semantics
It
and
doesn't,
say.
I don't believe it changes the definition.
It doesn't, it just makes, I'm just trying to get more clarity, since some people are understanding what this
So
meant
where are
by
you
it.
looking at putting attached?
After the word without,
So it would read,
with or without attached business or commercial spaces. I think that offers the standalone multifamily building, and then another one where you have the second floor multifamily over a commercial. That's the attached.
because I envision that there will be residential structures perhaps at the lower level that may have garages attached. Or there may be garages, I mean, I don't know
Right.
how the design of the building is. So that would be a totally residential structure within the confines of the entire
That's
mixed-use
fine.
development.
That's why I said with or without
Right,
business
right.
attached.
But do we need to mention, reference the,
The definition?
yeah,
Yeah, for section 8 of what I would like to see is mixed-use development, a development consisting of a mixture of residential, commercial, and business uses and building types, including single-family dwellings, townhouses, multifamily dwellings, and then put in parentheses, section 8 definitions, with or without attached business or commercial spaces, business and commercial buildings,
Yeah, that-
recreation facility, and open space.
And so the public understands when she's referencing section 8, as she mentioned earlier, she's referring to our zoning bylaws, section 8, not
Excuse
something
me.
else.
So the
Yes, go ahead.
numbers, we're recodifying, so all of these numbers are going to change.
We understand.
So when
That's the
we,
way they are right now.
right, I
And
know,
that's what
but-
we have to submit in for the recodification.
but we haven't numbered them, you see. So I understand where you're coming from, but when one is interpreting the zoning bylaw or reviewing it, they're going to look at the definitions. Two places planners and developers go to are the definitions and the table of uses. So they're going to know that we have you don't have to reference C.
However,
really
we do
don't.
have sections within the bylaw that have their own definitions that aren't, and planned adult residential is one of them.
Right, and that was probably not quite the path to follow, because when one amends a zoning bylaw, one finds that they run into a problem. All definitions should be under the definitions section, not incorporated or embodied within that specific section.
Wow.
So that's where we're
Wow.
moving, okay? So that's why we'd like to be able to be consistent.
And the only reason, what I think about.
Just remind everybody, just through the chair, please, okay? So I
Okay.
understand you
No,
are,
right,
but I just
right.
want to keep it,
Yeah,
Just understand that.
That's a fascinating concept, because I think of telecommunications bylaw where we have pages of definitions that are strictly pertaining to telecommunications within that section and not in the definitions themselves. So we have work to do.
it's just through the chair, that's what we're working
I
on.
hear that, I
We
hear
are
that.
trying to create consistency within our bylaw, so there isn't any misinterpretation. So, all of the definitions should be under the definitions section, which is a standard of practice followed within the planning communities, the different communities within the Commonwealth nationwide.
we go Tom first and then Sid through, okay,
you.
Tom?
My comments would be that, we've spoken about this in the past. We know we don't have a master plan, but we can't wait for the master plan to be developed. This is in front of us now, so we need to deal with what we know. And what we know is we already have a section 8, which we can reference. And if we need to change it at a later date, that's fine. I don't disagree with the fact that definitions need to be in one location, but we can't wait for that.
Through the chair, when are the definitions and the codifying and everything going to be finished?
Well-
What's the timeline for changing everything or correcting?
So through the chair, we're in the process of doing that right now.
With the process though, is it like October 31st or
That's actually,
2020?
so with all due respect, that falls under the purview of the town
Right.
the town clerk.
Right.
The dates. But Jeannie, our acting town clerk, sent us all email to remind us to go through all of the particular sections, the pertinent sections that fall under our purview. So
Yeah.
planning and the building inspector would be zoning bylaw.
Great.
So we are coming to that point where the recodification is going to occur, and you understand that the zoning bylaw will be merged within the same document. So when we speak to sections, articles and sections, they will all be changed, they will all be given new numbers. So again, with all due respect, to refer to section 8, that's going to go away as soon as the recodification occurs, and that is imminent,
Okay, so we're talking within the next year through the chair.
Yeah.
yes.
Okay.
In about a year's time.
I
would-
think
would
it's
guess.
actually, I think it's this fall. We're finalizing
Sure.
these documents now.
Well,
December 13th is the deadline for the department heads to make recommendations on adjustments. Then it comes back to the bylaw committee, all their recommendations to compile together, which then it goes to the company who's doing the codification. That it still has to go through the town council afterwards for a vote on it. And the codification, I was able to spend over 6 hours last night with it. It directly relates to the exact bylaws in here. What we've done is like section 350, and then it'll be subsection 7.1A, which directly relates to section 7.1 in the zoning bylaw A. So yes, the numbers have changed, but they're referring directly back to what we have. But with that being said, I don't think it hurts to relate to a definition in here. And then when it goes to the codification company, they will adjust, put the numbers in where they need to and put them in the right spots for us.
Okay.
Through the chair, as Ralph had indicated, this is still a lengthy process because the master plan has not been developed. It still needs to be reviewed. It needs to be discussed with the bylaw committee, and then it needs to go to the council for approval. So, and there's 2 readings, being a bylaw. So we're talking at the minimum 6 months to a year out.
Okay. All right, so the thought again, are we going to, even though we're quite aware, as Connie pointed out, that the reference to the bylaw, current bylaw section 8 is more likely than not to be changed, are we okay not having that and just because as further defined within our bylaws, adding language to that effect, or just keep it on the section 8 language and then have that in itself become amended?
And further on into this, through the chair, I'm sorry,
Please.
further on into this discussion, there is a definition of townhouse. And it's referenced by the section in the bylaw where it's located. And that came from this document, the
Right.
proposal. This isn't anything that we added, it was there. So in my opinion, it's the same.
It's already a moving target anyway.
It's the same issue.
Got it.
Multifamily dwellings, we're referencing, perhaps maybe this isn't the location to reference it. Maybe we should reference section 8 when you deal with single-family dwellings, townhouses, multifamily dwellings. This would be under mixed-use development, the following uses are permitted. Maybe that's the area where we address the location of the definition for multifamily dwelling.
All right.
Because there is also the location for the definition of townhouses, which is in the document as C 5.322. This would be under number 3.
Right.
What page is that on?
Page 3 of 7.
3, right. So I know I'm jumping ahead, but just to be consistent, maybe the issue of the location of the definition for mixed use in the beginning of the document is not so critical. It may be more suited back here in reference to the other definitions that have already been cited.
Okay, put that within that there. That makes sense. All right, so are we okay with adding the word attached after the word without to businesses, just for clarification, so there's not an inference that you can get a project through without commercial spaces, even though we know it's clearly not the case, but.
I don't believe it changes the intent of the
Okay,
definition.
so we'll have the word attached to it. Any thoughts? No. All right, anything else on that section before I go to
I just want to be clear,
Yeah.
through the chair, on
Please.
section 8 zoning bylaw, we're
Right.
going to list them all under definitions, so they're all in one location, which is fine with me.
Okay.
But it still will be listed.
Yes,
Right,
yes.
yeah, we'll hit that point.
For this document.
For this one. All right, table 3.1, then we
Okay.
go insert new bylaw 3.1 for public transportation facilities for bus stop, regional bus, rapid transit bus, or shuttle. Any comments there?
I don't know if we can dictate that. That's not up to us to decide if there's a bus stop.
Do we have a definition? We don't
You can have a
definition
facility,
for
a
transportation
location for one.
I don't.
It's
Almost
not- it's
fuel
not
the
up-
dreams, I guess. If you
Yes.
told them they will come, who knows? You know?
And that's pretty far out of town. There's no buses that run that route now. The furthest one that I know of goes to Stop and Shop Plaza.
Yeah, and Big Y, that's all I remember.
That's it.
So that's all, yeah.
So what we're doing is potentially asking the,
You know,
A developer.
yeah, to create something that doesn't exist today in the hopes that the, is it the city? Bus.
Pioneer Valley Transit Authority.
Pioneer Valley
PVTA, yeah.
agree to putting one out there.
So through the chair, if I may elaborate on this section of the table of uses. So we included public transportation facilities for bus stop to include regional bus, rapid transit bus, or shuttle bus. Now, the reason we elected to include those other types of services is in the event that there would be a designated site where a rapid transit bus could pull up
right.
and transport people to Springfield, Hartford, those folks who live within the mixed-use development district. Likewise, the shuttle bus, in the event, we're creating an area, a specific area where a large vehicle could pull up safely and conveniently and load and discharge passengers that didn't interfere with the development. So that is the purpose for that section.
So even private, let's say the group wants to do a bus trip to New York City, there'd be an area for large buses to come so that the people in there would be able, so it makes it bus friendly for group travel and so forth.
Yes.
Okay. All right, now, yeah.
Question?
Yes, Marilyn?
The issue that we struggled with, public transportation facilities. Facilities, to me, sends a much more involved situation. We had a bus facility on Shaker Road at one time, which was a whole bus company. And I understand what the focus of this particular use within the table of uses, and so could we consider changing public transportation facilities to public transportation locations to include bus stop, regional bus, rapid transit bus, or shuttle? These are locations for those opportunities to occur. It's not a facility, which to me sends a message. It might have a roof and a side and some windows.
All right, so, public areas?
Locations.
Location? And in addition, I guess, to include a bus stop, to regional bus, rapid transit bus, or shuttle. Let's say MGM, for the sake of discussion, wants to do pickup and deliveries at this place. How are they under this definition? Is that considered, that's not a rapid transit bus, or is it? I'm just trying to understand.
A rapid transit through the chair means it goes from point A to point B without any other stops.
So,
Which it could be, and it
What-
may not be.
Jane,
It's a shuttle.
it's a shuttle? Okay.
That would work.
So it could, so if they're stopping, again, I'll pick on MGM, or, Big E,
They'll
they
have a
stop at our
facility.
spot
They'll have a
and they
place
go
to
to another
stop in
spot
area.
and to another, I just want to make sure we add that definition,
No,
It's a shuttle
I
bus.
understand what's happening here. It was just the word facility that sent a different
Okay,
land
Only because
use.
we're thinking Long Geel,
yeah,
Right.
that was a bus facility.
Right.
It was a bus company, bus repair shop, A.W. Brown now.
all right, so be a pickup, a bus stop for potential either private or regional or shuttles and stuff.
So before we move forward,
Right, let's get the wording on it.
locations instead of facilities?
Correct. I'm okay with that. Everybody else fine?
Yep.
To include, locations to include bus stop, regional bus, rapid transit bus, or shuttle?
So we're going to remove the word facilities for and to include in the original draft.
Right.
Okay.
And then if you look after bus, it says to include, so we only have it listed once in the sentence.
All right. Everyone on board with that? Any other comments?
I'm okay with it.
All right. Let's go to the next thing. Still on page 2 of 7. We're in table 3.2, table of dimensional regulations, including mixed-use district zoning map. The official zoning map will be updated to reflect the change of zoning district for assessor's parcel ID 18-38-0, also known as 330 Chestnut Street, for industrial garden park to the newly created mixed-use zoning district.
Through the chair.
Please.
It's a whole separate item that
That's-
needs to be completely removed from the mixed-use bylaw.
Yeah, because that's ahead of the curve at this point, right, until it passes?
Correct.
Okay, remove.
The zoning map changes, it's a separate item.
Any comments or on what Ralph just said? Are we agreeing on that? We are? All right. So that section is going to be removed in our final recommendation or comments to the council. All right, let's go to the next one. We got section 5, special use regulation. And again, this is just, they say, a placeholder. It'll be codified under the general code. Mixed-use district, mixed-use development shall be permitted in the mixed-use district only upon issuance of a special permit with site plan review and design review from the planning board as specified in section 7.2, 7.4 and it should be East Long Meadow
Yes.
zoning bylaw. There's a typo there, so we'll get rid of that. The East Long Meadow zoning bylaw. And we're referencing sections that'll, again, they'll probably be changed or not. Any thoughts on that?
I'm okay.
Yeah, and remember, if we talk about, we are gonna talk about the renaming of this to, we were talking last time about calling it a village mixed use, because, I mean, something maybe the planning board may wanna consider is more in the traditional sense, mixed use, where you have, let's say, a town center. I'll pick on another client of Jane's, the Center Square area, and they wanna put apartments, for the sake of discussion, above that. Well, they wouldn't, under this particular proposal, they wouldn't have enough space, so that, so that's just a thought for the future. So the thought we were talking, last meeting was calling it using the word village, mixed-use village as well. All right, any other comments aside from the typo and perhaps renaming it, and these will all be reeled back if we do mixed-use village district as well. Any other changes or comments on that?
Just a comment.
Please.
On the last sentence where it says, from the planning board as specified in section 7.2 and 7.4.
Right.
Do we need to reference that in the definition section, so we, not that it's a definition, but then it's all together, so that in the event that there are changes, and there probably will be, it's not going to be 7.2 and 7.4 any longer.
All right, so which okay, we're in the definitions. Which number would we put that in?
Mixed-use development shall be permitted in mixed-use development.
I'm just concerned about having multiple locations within the document referencing things that have potential change.
This is a special use regulation. It identifies the sections that come into play with special permit and site plan review and design review. There are no references to definitions in this location. I think it stands as read, or as written. I don't see where we're omitting something that might come back to haunt us later on.
Okay, so we're comfortable, I don't.
Yeah, there
I
will
just
be other
want-
opportunities, I believe, based on what review that's taken place, that we would reference the definition
Okay.
section.
All right, general definition, one on the bottom of page 2 of 7. Mixed-use development shall mean a development consisting of a mixture of residential, commercial, and business uses, and building types including single-family dwellings, townhouses, multi-family dwellings with or without commercial space. I'll say to that if there's an agreement, with or without attached.
Attached needs to be added like we did.
Right. Business and commercial buildings, recreation and open space. Any thoughts there?
This is the same definition that we spoke of previously, and we added.
The facility, so add facility as well here.
Right.
Okay, we all on board with that?
Well, we changed recreation facility to location.
No,
No?
no.
Earlier in the document on page 1?
No, that was the bus stop.
So
That we
just
changed
public
the location.
transportation, so not every facility, just that location.
Right.
All right, item 2, again, page 3 of 7, to purpose. The purpose of this mixed-use development bylaw is to allow a number of uses as outlined in table 3-1 in a single development, and 2.11, I'll hit each one, allow for greater variety and flexibility in the development of housing types integrated with business and commercial uses. Comments on that? None?
Okay.
2.12, reduce vehicle trip miles by providing services within walking distance of residential units. Okay. Walking distance residential. We don't want to add the word or attached. Walking distance or, this is, it's walking distance anywhere, they're walking downstairs or what have you, right? Okay, 2.13, provide additional housing to, any expansion of that, or is that just fine? It seems to be fairly open, because the question then becomes is, what do we mean by additional housing? Is there a need, has there been a defined need in East Long Meadow for a general, we need additional housing in and of itself, or without it being specifically identified?
Okay. The elephant in the room, as far as housing that meets the needs of East Long Meadow. And I know I received a copy of an email from the Director of Planning, and she reassured us all, and thank you. I don't know that you saw it, that you knew that we got this copy, but that you referenced that the issue of housing needs would be addressed in the master plan, and that there would be focus that we're not in a dire need right now as meeting our regional fair share, regardless of how this particular project plays out. So that's new information. I have always been strongly an advocate for some sort of opportunity for a different offering for folks that want to stay in East Long Meadow. It was Carolyn Brennan at the previous planning board meeting who spoke of the needs of her seniors, and she spoke about a dollar range, which I realize you can't legislate in a bylaw, but a dollar range for a rental unit between $1,200 and $1,500 a month with 2 bedrooms, laundry facilities, that type of thing. Market rate is in that ballpark right now. As I look at the other apartments that are available in East Long Meadow through our senior housing. Is there any way that we as a community, through this document, and whether it be through a host community agreement, can we request a certain percentage of our units be market rate? That's even, maybe we can't, but market rate is the amount of money that at that particular time that people are willing to spend to rent an apartment. However, we're not talking about market rate with a proposal that we've looked at previously. Those were much more higher end in an offering. So I'm just throwing it out there. Wanting to provide something for our town.
Through the chair.
Please.
I can see where Marilyn is coming. My question, is that fair? Is that fair to the developers? Is that fair to the community? Yes, it sounds great when we're talking about it. It looks great on paper. But once you start doing this, all of a sudden we're starting to dictate. And that concerns me.
Well, I think it's a function of the size. I researched other communities because, and some other information, which, for instance, what I have here is a copy of the zoning bylaw of the town of Amherst, for instance. Now, they define, again, the operative word here is affordable housing. Doesn't necessarily mean low income. It says affordable housing. And affordable housing, and you can further delve into it. If somebody needs a copy of it, just let me know and I'll share it. And again, we're not Amherst, no, but if there's a good policy, we should look into it. Now, affordable housing, they define it as 80% of median income. If I'm just a quick summation of that, I believe.
60%.
Is it 60? Okay, 60. 60% of that. Another thing I did, because I just dumb coincidence, I listen to public radio. I'm listening to public radio on the way home, and NPR is talking about, or it may have been Boston News Radio. I was listening. They talked about their that if a project is of a certain size, they require 13% of the project being affordable housing. So I got a copy of the Metropolitan Area Planning Council's mixed-use zoning guidelines. And within that, it talks about, again, these are just guidelines, people, so we're not trying to, it's not dictating, it's just we're trying to create something that will work for the town of East Long Meadow, because remember, we're not making a project specifically for a developer. That may be the impetus, but at the end of the day, the petitioner is the planning board of East Long Meadow. And it talks about a greater variety of housing choices, and I'm just going to paraphrase, and if anyone is interested, just email me at donald.anderson@eastlongmeadowma.gov, and I will send a copy of this. May require some affordable units. If the community chooses to require some affordable units, it will need to specify the threshold number of units, the percentage of affordable units, the target income eligibility level, and other provisions similar to other affordable housing or inclusionary zoning bylaws. So this is a large project. The original, again, I'm going right to the impetus of this, which is M&A with their new name, I guess, East Long Meadow Development, redevelopment. Originally, I think it was looking at around 800 units, and that was the original request. And now the 800 units, let's say that's what was, the original, that would have a big effect on our housing, and hopefully in a positive way, but then again, it's also a potential, it may not be in a positive way. And in terms of, the type of housing, because if we don't take care of our affordable housing needs, so this one project could increase our voting population by over 10%. That's one project. And I mentioned in the past a similar project that the company put together with Morris Plains and requesting an additional 200 units of affordable housing. So there's two ways of dealing with it. One is to be proactive and put it up on the upfront, similar to what the Metropolitan Area Planning Council is doing, similar to Amherst and I'm sure other communities, of saying if you have a project of this much size that in and of itself could change your ratios of affordable housing, again, I'm using the word affordable housing, then you as a community can create a bylaw that addresses it in a proactive way. And that's something I think I personally would like at least exploring that, to say, because like I said, if this, this project goes through and it's all concierge living and so forth, well, our 7% number, if it's 800 units, would be appreciably reduced. And I think this, from a planning point of view, from our planning point of view, I think if there's an opportunity to have inclusionary housing, at least let's as a subcommittee discuss it. Connie, you have any thoughts on what I just said, or?
Well, we also at the planning board meeting had Lori Tanner, who is the affordable housing specialist, if you will, Pioneer Valley Planning Commission, speak to us about the potential for creating a housing production plan. That plan would address these issues of concern that you have. This would also parlay with the master plan update, which is ongoing this year, and we would be able to develop our guidelines for housing, and then after we develop our guidelines, then we could implement the zoning process.
So, question, just asking, are we ahead of ourselves looking at this right now, or should we be waiting until what you just mentioned comes into place, as opposed, because if this is approved as is, a petitioner, and then subsequently we try to revise it by adding affordable housing percentages. If a petitioner comes in and says, I'm applying under this, I'm grandfathered in, how can we, shouldn't we actually address it now, or should we wait on this for the future? Just asking.
But you can adopt another zoning bylaw that calls for inclusionary zoning or affordable housing. You can have this bylaw right now as it stands with your proposed modifications, and then there would be another bylaw that would be introduced. You have a mixed-use zoning district, and then you have your inclusionary zoning.
I mean, I'm just speaking for myself. I would like to at least make sure the first instance of this has some degree of inclusionary zoning on the onset, but that's just me. Thoughts? Anyone else want? Comments?
Chair?
Please.
I agree with you. As the planner said, we can change percentages and all later on. We can adjust the bylaw. But if we adopt this right now, and the developer says, I want to start building right now, whatever we do in the future doesn't help us.
No.
If we include it in, at least there's, if we say 8%, 10%, 12%, we know that's what we're going to be getting out of it. If in the future we decide to adjust, then we adjust.
Through the chair, if I may also offer Lori Tanner's comments, the state does not penalize us for not achieving our affordable housing goals.
Right.
We're just not entitled or allowed to, or qualifying for any type of grant that might be available. So right now, they're not slapping us on the wrist for not meeting the 10%. We just can't go for additional funding mechanisms for any other type of project, which includes housing or other.
Yeah, I'm not disputing that. I just happened to have been on the planning board in 1988. And back in that time, that was the one time that we had a project come in, and I felt like my hands were tied behind my back. It was a 40B for Benton Estates. And I realized the sense of futility of trying to, and they would come in and talk to us, and we really couldn't do anything. All it was just cosmetic stuff here, there. And I was an elected official during the last 40B. And if there's a way we can be proactive in zoning at this point in this project, especially a project of this magnitude, where, and I'm mentioning again, unless I'm missing the point, what happened in Morris Plains. In Morris Plains, that they did not have enough, and that developer went to the state and did the New Jersey equivalent of a 40B to them. So was Morris Plains penalized by not having it in their approval? No, they probably couldn't get grants from New Jersey, couldn't get this. But the developer went to the state and said, here you go, we need 200 affordable units in here. And they used their version of it. So I think what would happen is if they come in, they'll say, listen, this is concierge living. This is, you can't argue it's not affordable housing. I mean, it's anything less than that. You know, we should at this point have it so we don't go any worse than we are at 7%. I mean, we're better than just about most communities in our area at this point. So and we're taking efforts, but the fact that we're making efforts to keep these numbers no worse, I think is something we should do at this point to try to mitigate the chance of East Long Meadow being the Morris Plains of Massachusetts.
So, through the chair, what I'm hearing is you want an affordable housing component or element to this mixed use.
I think that if the mixed use zone is over a certain size of residential units, then the mixed use component comes in. Then the affordable housing unit comes in. Similar to what they use in other communities. So if it's over, say, 20 units, if they want to build a small mixed use for whatever reason, then it wouldn't kick in. But if they're building, say, again, I'm picking the number up, it's going to be sake of discussion, 40 units, 50 units, some number, at that point, that would trigger that a percentage of them be affordable.
So
Go ahead.
So let's say you have 10 units, then 1 unit would be affordable.
Right, but 10 would be too small. I don't think any town in Massachusetts has it where it's below 10. I believe 20 is what I've seen, but again, we could talk, not you and I, but we could talk to Pioneer Valley or the affordable and get sort of information across the state. On my own, I just happen to find a couple, that's all.
Through the chair, Connie, my question is, if we do put a component of affordable housing in, any developer can wait to the last phase of that development to take care of the affordable housing, or do they have to take care of affordable housing as they build the project?
As they build the project, as I understand it.
Okay.
And that would be language that we would put in here.
Because I'm just thinking if they wait till the end, you can always build a separate unit for affordable housing.
Well, through the chair, as you're developing affordable housing, the housing that you are creating can't look or feel or
Correct.
be any different than
Correct.
the other units. There's no noticeable difference. The Zoning Board of Appeals is in the process of updating their policies and procedure manual. And as you know, 40B projects come under the purview of the Zoning Board of Appeals, and the ZBA too has an antiquated document. So we've been working on revisiting and recreating that document and bringing it to current practices. So the ZBA would be the board that weighs in on this.
Correct.
Okay.
Thank you.
Through the chair, Don, you were on the planning board when we were dealing with the planned adult residential district. And at the time, we heard from the community through public hearings that they were looking for, here again, the word affordable. And it's not so much affordable in terms of numbers, it's what East Long Meadow folks can pay to stay in East Long Meadow. And so we worked very hard on that bylaw, and we included a hybrid formula within that bylaw as to density. And we knew that if you just built a smaller unit, the cost of construction would be more affordable than if you built a 2,500 square foot condominium that would just jank the price up. So we worked hard on a hybrid formula to encourage smaller units with increased density. And we included it within the bylaw, it's there. And we spoke to the developer, we didn't empower, there was just the suggestion. Because we recognize the fact that the developer needs to appreciate an economic benefit for what he's doing. And the choice was single-family houses, 2,500 large single-family houses, and they're all starting at $500,000 to begin with. And this priced a lot of our folks, and so we're filling the need of surrounding communities. And I'm not arguing they're now East Long Meadow residents, but I struggle with what can we do as a town to create an opportunity for our folks to stay here. And that's what we're struggling with right now. Is it fair? Even if we could, even through a community host community agreement, a certain percentage of the units are market. Whatever that number is, it's more affordable than luxury.
Well, through the chair, I mean, as far as supply and demand, if I have an affordable housing condominium and I'm ready to sell it, I'll be doggone if I'm gonna sit there and say, well, I'm only gonna take this much because I wanna be fair to the town. I wanna want as much as I can get for it. Now, if we're talking about apartments, that's something different.
Well, we have, are you talking, I don't understand how.
If it's under 40B affordable housing.
It's got a deed restriction in it.
Right, okay, but still with that, yeah, you make it, I don't know, I just have some concerns with this, that we're doing too much dictation.
Well, unfortunately, I said, if we put ourselves in a situation, the dictation is going to be happening to us by the state. It could happen to us by the state. I said, if we have a situation where we don't have enough affordable housing to the point where the state says, and now a petitioner comes in and says, see what happened? 2% affordable housing, and so the state will do to us, and I will have a deja vu on a larger level of what happened to us in the late 80s.
Keep in mind, we're looking through the entire town, not just one project,
Correct.
okay?
Yeah, but projects of certain magnitudes. It could be over 20 residential units, 30 residential. Somebody wants, and I'm not talking about, subdivisions per se. I'm talking about high density, this type of mixed use project. And I said, and this is, like I said, we're not reinventing the wheel. This is right here from the Metropolitan Area Planning Council within their recommendations and some suggestions in here.
Okay, through the chair.
Please.
Connie, what are your thoughts on all of this? I mean, we're discussing this, and what are your thoughts?
Well, I think that there's a need for affordable housing within the community, and by affordable, that is not low-income subsidized housing. Affordable housing should be understood by everyone that is the house that the teacher, the firefighter, the police officer, the municipal employee, the person who's perhaps working at Starbucks in a managerial position, the people who work in the community, who make the community what it is. So that's affordable housing, and I think people get scared sometimes. They think, oh my gosh, you know, what's going to happen to the traditional character and the charm of the community by allowing a new housing type to come in? Not only apartments or what have you, townhomes, but you know, the affordable housing component. So I really want to stress that affordable is generally somebody who's working really hard, you know, who has a personal property pride in either ownership and rent, and wants to be in the community. They so strongly desire to be in the community, but they can't afford a $500,000 house simply because of their salary. And that salary is not going to change. It's never going to be able to afford a $500,000 house. So I think that there is a need. I think that I do want to segue back to the inclusionary zoning and the past project. The state has statutory requirements in place, and I have seen it happen where a municipality has crafted a bylaw or an ordinance, and the developer will come in and say, well, that's very nice, that's very pretty, I like your words, but the state says I can do this. So we have to be mindful that the state can trump the local bylaw in this case. That's when you want to set up really strict guidelines for design. You want to make sure that your site plan approved, you know, the site plan, because it is all site plan based. You want to make sure you have your landscaping and your circulation and other safety elements as part of your bylaw, so that they can't be challenged to such a degree where you're told, we don't have to do that because the state law doesn't require us to do that. So I don't know if I've given you some food for thought, but those are...
Also, if I may, when, after Robin had left us and we had a substitute planner from the Pioneer Valley Planning Commission, I can't remember his name.
I think.
It was Larry Smith. He was
Larry
Larry
Smith,
Smith.
okay. I don't know if you talked with Larry. I know I spoke with Larry about inclusionary zoning, because this has been out there. And one of the things that he pointed out to us is that the management of this type of housing
spectrum.
Yes, is challenging for a community. And so it's not, you know, it's not as simple as just putting down in the bylaw, we want 10% of every 100 units, we want 10% as affordable through inclusionary zoning, whatever. It's not that simple.
No,
because there needs to be some sort of vehicle in place to manage those units. Now, what we're focusing on with, and this is a town bylaw, but I know there's a project that's out there that we've been introduced to. There is management of this project as I see it, and perhaps it might be a tad easier if there was some sort of an inclusionary zoning. I also want to just introduce the fact that Brownstone Gardens, our elderly housing, has integrated low income, moderate income, and market rate all within the 3 sections of Brownstone. And nobody knows, the units are all the same. I mean, basically the same. Nobody knows that this one is on, you know, that you're paying less than I'm paying, and I'm paying less than Ralph is paying. But integration is a challenge too. I mean, I know we're not, you know, we're looking for pie in the sky, but it can be successfully done if done properly.
And the fact that we already have one already with Benton Estates, that you know people, certain units over there, and people can't tell the difference of which one. They have to go back, you know, offer it back into the pool. They have to get approvals for refinance and stuff like that. So we already have something in place
So
ready.
Through the chair, we're talking mixed-use bylaw, mixed-use district. Do you have any numbers in mind as far as units? Anything greater than 100 units must have 10%.
Well, I think what we want to do is talk to the Pioneer Valley Planning Commission or someone else and find out what the standard, what I have found, and again, this is a small view, is typically it's over like 20, you could do 25 and so forth. Something that if the project was totally, the numbers will not totally eviscerate our 7%.
I'm looking at this bylaw here, which stipulates 20-acre development, certain lot coverage and all, which is basically going to up the number of residential units. We're looking at quite a few residential units. And so what I'm saying is, what do we create for this zone, this time, right now, knowing that this is a village style, we're gonna call it mixed-use development. Knowing that if we have a different mixed-use development, it's gonna be a different
Right, it
bylaw
will be, yeah.
with a different percentage.
I think we need like a grid on here, similar to what we see in Amherst, of a percentage that if it's over this, then, I mean, I don't think we have to go to 13%, but maybe if that's what you want, 10%, for instance. That'll at least put us in parity and not put us in any worse situation. And it'll actually move that 7% number higher.
So are you looking at doing like a sliding
Like, for instance,
scale?
some are 12%, Boston is 13%, we're neither Amherst, we're neither Boston, and our numbers are, I believe, we're in the higher of the percentages of many of our sister communities around
Sure.
here. So we're not, we do have more affordable housing than most, but I think we should have something that's not gonna make our situation any worse, and I would say a 10% might be something to at least start our conversations with. If it's over, 20, 25 units type, and then it kicks in, and anything under that, it would not. Just throw it out, this is just, again, this is open discussion.
I wasn't sure if we're looking at, let's say, between 25 units and 100 units, we're looking at, let's say, 8%. Between 100 and 200 units, you would up that to 10%. 200 units and above, you'd be at 12%.
See, I think we have to.
And I'm just throwing it out there as thoughts.
I think part of it's gonna be in terms of, you may have a phased project, so it may come in with you with 100 units, and we say this percent, and all of a sudden, now another 100 comes in, and now you have now you're overweighting the second phase with a much higher percentage to kind of bring that first phase into compliance as well as when you can put the aggregate together.
Through the chair, and that's a discussion we have to have with respect to
Right.
the ratio between the non-residential uses and the residential uses of a mixed-use development. The anticipation is that there would be phased sections and not all done at once. And would there be a requirement of, I personally would not want to see 400 units suddenly developed with absolutely no commercial piece. And I'm not saying that's what would
Right.
happen, but the point is, I've learned through experience, you gotta write it down. You have to get all your ducks in a row so that everybody knows what the anticipation is moving forward. And if you have a phased-in development, I would expect that a certain percentage, that the ratio of
Maintained.
would be maintained with each phase, whether it be the non-residential versus residential, or a percentage of affordable within that.
And from a developer's point of view, let's say the developer wants to put 400 units. You can say, well, let you put 440 units in, so they'll get their money on their 400, but 440 will add more, but the extra 10% will be on top of it. So as long as I'm just throwing ideas out to, or do we want it within? I want 400 and it has to be within the 400 or 400 plus.
May, through the chair.
Please.
While we have some developers here, I'd like to get their view. I know you'd like to, just while we're here.
I have no issue with that this kind of meeting.
What are your thoughts with this? 10% affordable housing as a development is built up?
That's fine.
Okay. 10%.
That was simple.
Let's move on. Let's move on. To the chair.
Thank you.
Well, okay, then I need to ask the question, the integration of, you know, affordable versus higher-end offerings, the management of such, is that within a reasonable expectation of how you would be able to handle that type of directive from the town?
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, through the chair, 10% good.
I think that's something, we just gotta firm up the language and determine what percentages. We'll have that for our next meeting, I guess. Let's just continue reading through here, I'm gonna put that in. Next one is gonna be percent affordable, and what's the threshold number? Okay, that'll be for next meeting. All right, where did I,
2.14 then.
2.14, promote the preservation of open space. All right. Sounds good. Are we, you know, again, are we talking about, I think Sid mentioned in a previous meeting, if it wasn't him, forgive me, we're talking about with opening up the idea of parking garage in lieu and adding additional in consideration of open space. In other words, instead of having all the parking on one level, having less, but using the area requirement as if there were one level to have the same amount of parking, but in less land, you know, less asphalt world over there. Is that something to consider? Did I misquote you, or?
No, I've just been fixated on how parking garages can help if they're cost effective.
Right, as long as they said, here's how much area you'd be putting in parking per the parking requirements. Put it in this spot, smaller area, taller, but that doesn't mean you're still asphalting this other spot. Use that for more open space. Did I pretty much?
Yes.
I did, okay. Thoughts?
Go ahead.
I like the concept, as long as we limit the height of a parking garage. I don't want to see MGM 4 or 5 stories high or whatever. But I think that will enable a lot more green space, open space around it. I personally like the concept. I think it's a good idea. I don't know if it's feasible through development. That would be up to them with the site plan and all. But I think something like that in the bylaw.
Provide that option. Yeah.
I think an option, it doesn't hurt. Obviously, we have to change more in the bylaw, because I don't believe a parking garage is allowed right now at all.
No, this way, and again, nor is the affordable housing things. These are all
Yep.
brand new things going to be part of it. And again, what we've done in the past in our and some of the, you know, planning board proposals is, if you give a concession in terms of area, that's usable area. You're not having like an entire wetlands and say, oh yeah, I'll give you all this wetlands, and if we'll do that. You're giving area that otherwise would have been asphalt city as additional open space for that. Is that correct?
Sure.
Sure. What do you say?
Yeah, well, I don't say through the chair, we don't know that. They could put up another building. I mean,
No,
unless we
actually-
come up with the definition and the
No,
percentage.
we'd be saying reserved for open space, and it would be open space
That's
that's
my point.
usable open space.
That's my
So
point.
that would have to be on the site plan and say, listen, this is what we could be doing per this. We're gonna make it smaller, subject to site plan review, the whole project. Make sure, you know, it flows well, police, fire comment, the whole public comment. But we're gonna take this usable land that we would have turned into asphalt city, we're gonna turn that into passive recreation or some other type of thing.
If it's in writing, as Marilyn said.
Okay.
Through the chair, I look at East Long Meadow as being part rural, suburban, urban, and industrial. We have all of those mixes within the confines of our little town. It's a little town.
Yeah.
I do not picture a parking garage in East Long Meadow. I picture a parking garage in the inner city where you have an area that you are doing sort of an infill kind of development, where you're creating a larger structure that has to provide parking within a confined space. This bylaw has some additional language that addresses parking. And the bylaw looks to perhaps if the developer can document that they don't need the amount of parking that the minimum parking requirements are for the town, that they can do less. And so that needs to be sort of massaged a little bit, because I think that's a much better way to go, and that the minimum required parking space is any different than what the town would expect and what the developer thinks he needs would be left as open space on the plan. And then for future changes, because you don't know what the future changes of a mixed-use development will be going forward, this need may only require X amount of parking, but a future need may require more. And so if it's on the plan as future designated parking but kept as open space, it's the best of both worlds. So that would be my take. I can't picture, the only place where I can picture a parking garage is next to Sid's house.
Well, we went through this.
In the
Square
center of
project.
town.
All right, so promote preservation of open space, we'll leave it the way it is. Next one is 2.15, promote the redevelopment of legacy industrial sites. What's that? Thoughts?
Very simple. I think it should be removed, although for this particular one, that works. It doesn't mean this is an entire town zoning bylaw. And Elmcrest Country Club, the golf out there. Goldstein's property has over 300 acres. We may see someone coming in those, and those aren't industrial legacy sites. I just, as a purpose, I don't, that basically says, hey, the only place we want it is here.
Well, I think in the overall planning, is I think industrial legacy sites typically want to be industrial legacy sites moving forward. This is something, you know, we don't want to give a statement that unintended consequence to say that we as a town want you industrial legacy sites to be replaced with something else. You know, so I think at this point, I'm in agreement with you. I think we can strike that provision unless somebody can come up with some rewording of that one. That's fine. We're all on board with that? All right, 215. All right, continued. 3, uses allowed by special permit. All right, in mixed-use development, the following uses are permitted. Any comments there?
First of all, you need to strike uses allowed by special permit.
Okay.
The development is allowed by special permit. There are uses in the table of uses, some that will require their own special permit. It's a little confusing.
Like a restaurant within the place?
Correct. So
Okay.
I would just make number 3, in a mixed-use development, the following uses are permitted by right. I added the words by right.
Why did you want to add by right, or just leave it as are permitted? Or wouldn't that be inferred?
Well, because of the issue of special permit, you know, and it doesn't have to be, because it started out uses allowed by special permit, and that sent me thinking that you can build a single-family house without a special permit. You can do a townhouse. It's within the development's under special permit, but those uses within are allowed by right.
By right, through the chair, I do believe, through just seeing the solar bylaw, suit and all, the AG was, hey, you allowed these by right, and that's why I think it is by right. You know what? It says you can do it, that's it.
Okay.
Just a thought.
All right, so let's hit the rest of the hot points over here. We have 3.11, single-family dwelling. I don't think there's anything there. 3.12, townhouses.
That's where the definition of a townhouse is located under 5.322.
All right, so add the definition, of course, those numbers will likely change
Right.
over here, but that's
right.
what it is presently. 3.13, multifamily dwellings. Do we have
That's where we would put C,
8?
Section 8 definition.
Yeah. Okay, so items 1 and 2 are standalones. The multifamily are basically And I'm thinking, it's almost like there's some overlap here, because you can have single-family condominiums, because it's almost, the single-family dwellings, this is a condominium type project. It's probably under chapter 183, right, Jane?
Certain ones will be condos, I think some of them, most of
Okay.
them will be rentals.
But you're not selling a single-family dwelling that would not be part of a condo association, correct?
John?
No.
No? All right, so I would say, I think we have 3.1, 3.14. But remember, we're not building a bylaw specifically for this person. Can we see situations where a multi-use are gonna have all standalone buildings without it being a condominium? I guess it's possible.
Sure.
Okay. All right, multi-family dwellings, we got that one.
I'm sorry, so
We're adding definition, see section 8?
see section 8 definition under multifamily dwellings.
Okay. 3.14 condominiums.
Okay, those are things that we added.
Condominium was.
You guys, because I see the underline on here, and 3.15 apartments.
Because and the apartments, when Ralph and I were reviewing this, we were just trying to think of the different housing options and how they would be defined. The multifamily dwellings, looking at this again, I think the multifamily dwellings would certainly include the apartment part. So I don't know that needs to be a specific designation. We all know it.
Why can't we just roll it into 3.11, single-family dwellings, comma, condominiums, and/or apartments?
Excuse me, through the chair, is a
Please.
condominium a form of ownership? It's not a structure, it's a form of ownership.
Okay, so we're talking about the following permitted structures.
Yeah, that's what I-
We're talking about.
I agree with you.
So we're talking about structures that are allowed, or
Correct,
forms of
right.
ownership
So
allowed?
the townhouses effectively could become a condominium because of the ownership.
Right, people can
Right,
convert it anywhere
right.
into it. So,
You're talking through the chair about the architectural style that we're
Correct.
looking at. The generic term for the architectural style.
right, so single family, it could be condominium, it could not be, depending on the project, right? And same with townhouses and multifamily.
So through the chair, I believe that if we go with 3.11 single-family dwellings, 3.12 townhouses, C 5.322 for the definition, 3.13 multifamily dwellings, C section 8 for the definition, that covers the types of residential structures that we can anticipate, because the apartments would be certainly included within the multifamily dwellings.
Okay,
Now you had under 3 through the chair,
That's-
3.15.
That was my addition.
Okay.
And that was just based on wanting to define, but now that we've straightened out the definition of
Okay, good.
multifamily dwelling, it's not necessary.
Not
It's-
necessary.
okay.
So we would stop at 3 point.
So your edits, 314, 315
Are off, right.
And you had a comment about 40% residential, that's tabled to another section?
That's just in terms of, when I was thinking apartments, I didn't know if there was a discussion about whether through the bylaw, we would want to add a percentage or a guideline for the types of houses. And the only reason why I'm even saying this was I was reassured by the chairman of the planning board that there were sections in this bylaw that said 20% for townhouses, 20% for apartments, 20% for, and I didn't find anything like that in the bylaw at all. So it may have been discussed, but it never got transferred to paper.
Part of it's gonna be somewhat self-governing, but if you have, let's say, basically somebody's gonna own the unit. So whether it's East Long Meadow redevelopment or some other company owns 20% of it, and they decide not to have them owner occupied, it's gonna be rentals. And then Ralph wants to buy one of buy one of the condo units, for instance. The bank is going to take a look at that entire project's financials and determine whether there's too much resident apartments or rentals versus non-rentals in there. So there might be, so certain lenders may or may not give loans on, and I wish I could remember Jane, I don't know if you remember the ratios. I mean, I know that one place over in Springfield, that there's one single owner that has too much control over it, so you can't get FHA, I believe, or something. So there's gonna be some sort of self-controlling, because if I wanna buy a place and I can't get the mortgage because they feel there's too much single owner control on there, I mean, obviously there's gonna have to be adjustments if they wanna have it, unless we have the whole place being apartments.
So, and that's our, through the chair, that's my thought. I guess what I'm looking at is how do we make this, and apartments to me is a brick building with 20 units in it, each one has a bedroom or two. Condominium, rentals, ownership, I mean, how do we look at this and say, hey, we want a little bit of each?
That's right.
We want people to be able to rent apartments, maybe for a 3-month stay, 6-month stay, 6 years, whatever. But have some townhouses, have some apartments. How do we get that mix is what I'm looking at, and what type of a mix are we looking for?
The other thought is, in this, the question also becomes in terms of like transitory type living, Airbnbs and things of that nature, is there gonna be, we putting restriction on that we're not allowing hotel component in there?
Through the chair, you
Please.
can deal with an Airbnb through another bylaw.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, so the question.
If I may, just
Yeah,
quickly, I
yes, Jane.
think, Ralph, you addressed that site plan, right? If the type of mix you want, certain location, because I don't think you want to limit locations as to what certain type of percentage of mix you may want, because one location may be more appropriate for one thing and another for another thing.
Problem is through a site plan, is if the developer meets the
Of
requirements
the bylaw.
of the bylaw, that's it. So if the bylaw doesn't say, hey, at least do a mix of 5% each, and then you can do 95% of this, but 5% has to be apartments. It doesn't get, you don't have any split like that.
So through the chair, if I may, I would like you to Google Deer Valley Townhomes in Ellington, Connecticut, and you can see a wonderful example of apartment-style living. I know that in your mind, or it appears from your conversation that you're having at the table, you're thinking of a multi-story unit box. That's not the way apartments can be designed.
Absolutely, and
But
that's, I encourage that,
Right,
but what I'm
right.
saying is some are apartments, some are condominiums, some are single family. How do we get a nice mix in there?
So through the chair, we have design guidelines under our site plan approval. And currently, the way the bylaw is crafted, it states that there is a separate design committee, design review committee. There's nothing that really says the planning board nor its planner, who has 2 degrees in design, doesn't have an opinion on what makes for quality design. So you don't really have to, and as long as we're allowed to enforce this, because sometimes we do get a little pushback saying, well, tell me where it says this, and of course we have to show the developer where it says exactly what it is we're trying to enforce. But we do have design guidelines. We could serve to beef them up a little bit, make them a little more robust. And also if you're creating an a village mixed-use bylaw, you certainly can incorporate design guidelines in the bylaw. So,
I don't know how we
Right,
can
so
enforce
that's,
the
I guess what
apartments.
we're saying is a design guideline.
it's a guideline, but most developers like guidelines. They like to, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Developer who's at the table, but you like a little bit of direction so that you know how to create a design that you're going to be pleased with and proud of. Most developers, when they put their name on a design, just like an architect, because that's their staple. So they want to create something that's beautiful.
See, the thing is, I don't know how we can mandate here the amount of apartments versus condominiums, because if the apartment model isn't working, Or if the apartment model works wonderfully and they have it all, there's nothing saying in the future they're not gonna come in and try to convert that and turn that into condominiums.
Through the chair,
Yes.
we felt that, as the planning board felt that it would be up to the market to dictate those conditions, because in some economies, we see condominium development going, sky high. But in other economies, we see the rise of apartment living. We have an aging baby boomer population. We have a population that doesn't necessarily, not just baby boomers, but a more youthful demographic that really does not desire the white picket fence and the home ownership. They want maintenance-free, turnkey, I can travel when I want to, I don't have to worry about anything because the leasing property management team is at the office. So we are seeing more and more, again, as our particular demographic in town is aging. And again, we want to keep them in town, and we want to create attractive places, as well as doing some placemaking here in the town of East Long Meadow that continues to foster that traditional community and charm that the town has, maintain some of the rural character through the architectural style. You're probably not going to put a deconstructive type of architectural example up in that area, even though it is a industrial use. You really could play with it a little bit and say, oh, we've got some modern architecture here, or we've got, some buildings that are a little more or a little less traditional New England. It's going to be up to up to the planning board to enforce the design guidelines. If you want to incorporate something in the mixed-use district that says, we want to maintain the traditional New England character, please do. Please do.
And the other point is this: if I remember a previous presentation from John and Joe, one of the things I thought they said was, okay, we're going to sell X number of units as condominiums, and then when we're at a certain financial point, we may as well just have the rest as apartments over there. That's why I said I don't think that we can dictate it, because let's say hypothetically I'm one of the first buyers of the condominium. Now, what's not a surprise in condo rules and bylaws and rules and regs is the right of first refusal. So I now want to sell it out. Well, John and Joe say, thank you, we want to buy it back in to us. So I don't know if we can really dictate, nor should we dictate, the amount of apartments per se, or the type of ownership. The market's going to dictate it with the bank saying there's too much control by one person. You can't get a blah blah government loan because of that, like I've seen in other refinances or sales. You have to pretty much have a cash buyer. I don't think I want to create that environment. Or you may have a situation, like I said, where they sell 25%, pay for the project with that, and now the rest of it they say, no, we want this as an annuity for East Long Meadow redevelopment, so we're just going to collect the rent and manage the property. And as I sell mine, you sell yours, they buy it back, and now I have a bigger percentage. I don't think we can do that in a bylaw per se. I mean, am I mistaken? I think it's just the type that it's single family, multifamily, standalone buildings, multifamily buildings per se, versus here's how many condos you can have, because you can have a subdivision and I could buy the entire subdivision and turn it all into rentals and those single family homes. It doesn't preclude me from doing that. And I don't know. What are your thoughts on that, guys? Marilyn?
Question through the chair. You and I have both had experience over time on the planning board, and there have been situations where we've gone through the entire permitting process, everything is established, and all of a sudden the project is sold to someone else. Okay. This is someone else that we haven't had the opportunity to interface with, get an appreciation of their vision. There's nothing in this bylaw that I can see that would prevent whether the project that we know about or another project in town from changing hands and dramatically changing what we are going to receive as a community. Would we be willing to accept, and this, I'm playing the devil's advocate, would we be willing to accept the large brick buildings? And I know design review comes into play, but design review is feel-good stuff. It's stuff that, we all say, well, this is what we like to see and whatnot, and if you're dealing with a willing participant, it's wonderful. But we could have someone come in and you can't market value and they're gonna put in an apartment building because the bylaw says they can do it. How can we protect East Long Meadow from 4 floors of solid brick and mortar?
Through the
Through
chair,
design guides.
through the decision. You have a decision that is rendered or handed down by the planning board, and the decision stipulates what the design, based on the site plan approval, dictates. That's why I have seen some really light decisions. The decision has to be defensible in court.
Exactly.
So have you read my decisions?
Send them to me, I'd love to read them.
Not that.
Well, how is
but-
it we're still fighting in court?
But because I didn't write those decisions. Sorry, that was
No,
really.
no,
rude.
no,
And I don't mean it that way. I don't mean it that way.
But
I
it's
really
very
don't.
frustrating
Very
when
humble.
you're at this end of the, and we're dealing with lots of litigation out there and decisions. And I just, I want to protect our community from that kind of.
So, there are general conditions, blah, 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 blah. Then there are there are conditions that are strictly for that particular project. So if Mr. Developer comes in and the planning board allows them to do this apartment style complex that looks like bungalow style housing, no more than 2.5-story tall, 8 units per structure, that's what its decision says, and you can't modify it unless you go back before the planning board and submit that request for modification, and it's reviewed one more time. And the planning board could deny the request and say, no, I'm sorry. That they can't, sometimes I think there's some reservation, but the planning board is a very powerful board. And if they find that it doesn't honor that which the site plan review, the zoning bylaw, the master plan request or require or dictate or choose whatever you want to as the word, you can reject it. You can reject it. And some people might say, oh yeah, site plan review, as long as it meets these basic. No, if you want a picket fence up there and they're gonna put a chain link fence up there, you can say no to that chain link fence because it is not maintaining the intrinsic quality, the architectural design that you see East Long Meadow as being. So you have a lot of power. The planning board has a lot of power.
Okay, just one follow-up quickly. Based on the document that we're working on, which is either a mixed-use village district or a mixed-use development, however it ends up being titled, I need the reassurance of knowing that within that document, we're talking about mixed uses of residential as well as mixed uses of non-residential. So if anyone went through the district change and came forward with a mixed-use development, would it be acceptable that it would be only one type of housing rather than a mixed use of housing?
Well, not the way this is structured. You
Well,
want a mixed use of
okay,
housing.
that's what I'm trying to feel comfortable with.
Yeah.
And if that's the case, then you do need to leave some leverage. I just want to protect our town from one type of housing that may not be in the best interest of the community, that's all.
Okay.
Through the chair, if I may.
Yes, Christine.
So I just want to give an example, right, of something that my office represented another developer, right? And in the town site plan decision and design decision for them, the town didn't say anything in their bylaw about certain types of trees, right? But in the site plan decision, they said, hey, we definitely don't want arborvitaes, right? They wanted some other type of bush, tree, shrub thing. My client did not do that, and they said, well, I'm gonna put in arborvitaes because they're similar, right? Town didn't say anything about arborvitaes, but they said bush, whatever. They put in arborvitaes because they were similar and it was better for erosion or I don't know, right? And so we fought the town and said, well, we meet the minimum, right? But because they dictated in their site plan decision that we couldn't hit, they wanted X, Y, Z and not arborvitae's, we lost because we put arborvitae's. So there is that control within the site plan decision. So I'm putting, we lost, but, so the site plan can definitely dictate those stringencies and what the town wants. So, yes, I agree on that regard.
Thank you.
Okay, that helps.
It does.
Okay, so we'll have that on my next agenda as well, it's a little further conversation on condo versus apartment. Now we're gonna go to 3.16, or 3.1, business and commercial uses compatible with and supportive of residential uses as listed by the East Long Meadow Schedule of Use Regulations 3.1. Thoughts on that?
Go ahead, Ralph, your turn.
What is compatible with and supportive of residential uses? If it's listed in table 3.1,
It's accepted.
it's allowed.
Okay.
I don't think we need, I call it extra fluff in there.
Does it hurt to have it in there?
Go ahead, Marilyn.
Fluff is good. No, really, we just felt we were trying to, in fact, I brought an issue before the planning board recently about some language in the subdivision control law. And I was told we're trying to avoid a lot of fluff. And so here we have what I feel is language that it's just not necessary. Business and commercial uses as listed in the East Long Meadow Schedule of Use Regulations, Table 3-1, period.
Oh, you know why, through the chair, this came about?
What?
Okay, so there was some discussion of the size of a commercial structure. And again, being mindful of the past experience with any type of, I don't think they call them big box anymore. They call them large, what's the term, John? It's no longer called big box.
Large
Large
retail.
retail.
Large retail
Is it
establishment.
just, yeah, so is that, it's just, so they were, again, being mindful of.
Fred instead of Harry.
What's that?
Call it Fred instead of Harry.
So that's how that section evolved. We didn't want to have,
Wouldn't our bylaw?
But we already have
We have a bylaw.
maximum, well, we have maximum square
Maximum
footage
square
and all
footage.
within the bylaw, that no single facility can be more than, I believe it's 25,000 square feet, or two at 15,000 or whatever, so.
but don't forget with the new mixed use, you might have multiple buildings. And so we wanted to make sure that the developer
Yeah.
clearly understood that there were dimensional restrictions.
Well, I'm not adverse to keeping compatible with it. I'm not adverse in this case to have the fluff in there. I mean, think about it, the type of businesses that are supportive of residential uses would be, let's say, maybe a small restaurant, a convenience store, maybe a place like that. But if somebody says, I want to open an auto parts store or
Right.
something like that in there,
Soda
it's allowed.
recycling cans.
Yes.
Yeah, soda recycling cans or something of that nature. You know, I mean, I think what it suggests is the type of businesses are supportive of within the village. So I'm not adverse to it, but if you, again, I'm listening to all you guys, what you thought.
I know.
It's, like I said, it was just, I
So-
can live with it either way, that's
So we
fine.
can leave it in
Leave
there?
it in.
Leave it in? All right. All right, 3.1, residential
No, three.
recreation, I'm sorry, recreational and open space, including community buildings. Put the word facility back in?
Yep.
Okay, all on board?
Sure.
All right, I'm on the bottom of page 3, 3.2, business commercial uses, rolling into page 4. Commercial and businesses, uses when integrated with residential uses as well as accessory uses within the mixed-use district as provided in the East Long Meadow Schedule of Use Regulations, Table 3-1, shall be allowed as follows. Any tweaking of that?
Can I just
Yes, Jen?
quickly, do you guys have a different version than the planning board provided? Because I think I have a different version.
What does yours say in that spot?
Mine says, well, I didn't have those things about apartments or condos. And
No,
Those
that
are
was-
my edits.
Those were her edits, and
those are the-
I'm trying to make a
Well,
point
I
of
just,
not.
mine hasn't went in 3 to 4, and so I'm just wondering, so that's why I wasn't,
Oh,
we
you know
had
what?
different
I
things.
did add her edit to it. I should say commercial and businesses, uses when integrated with residential uses, as well as accessory uses as provided for the East Long Meadow Schedule of Use Regulations.
Right,
3-1.
'cause I wasn't-
I have a black and white printer, so I'm missing some of the red highlights in the
Okay.
color version, so I
Got it.
apologize. Up to this point, it wasn't too bad.
No, it wasn't that bad, I was just trying to figure
Yeah.
out which version, or what is being used.
Through the chair, I had the May edition. I didn't have whatever you're working on, so.
Yeah, I have the May 28th edition. It just had, but
Okay.
a couple of our members on their own made a couple edits, and I thought it was better to anticipate the questions, so I printed up theirs, but I used my office printer, which is in color, so I'm missing a couple, so I apologize. I'm trying to be mindful of the changes. I tried to highlight them and pick up on it, but not perfect. So thoughts on that one,
Ralph and I discussed, if I may,
please.
that we just reworded it. We reworded it to be commercial, comma, business, comma. We crossed out uses when integrated with residential uses. Basically, the wording is commercial, comma, business, comma, and accessory uses within the mixed-use district as provided for in the East Long Meadow Schedule of Use Regulations Table 3-1 shall be allowed as follows. We just felt it flowed better to be reworded like that. It doesn't change the impact of, or the intent of what was being said.
Okay. Any thoughts on that, anyone else? You're fine? Okay, then with edits.
So the language is commercial, comma, business, comma, and accessory uses within the mixed-use district as provided for in the East Long Meadow Schedule of Use Regulations. Table 3-1 shall be allowed as follows.
Okay. 3.21, let's see, allowed is one of your edits, right?
Correct.
3.21, uses less than 10,000 square feet may occur without restriction except for uses requiring a special permit. One single use with up to a maximum of 25,000 square feet is allowed in the project. In addition, 2 uses up to a maximum of 15,000 square feet each may be allowed in the project. Any thoughts on that, or does it, are we,
Just,
because what if the project is maximum size?
yeah, I just have a need for an explanation of that. It says single use with up to a maximum of 25,000 square feet is allowed in the project. That be in any project that gets submitted
Under this, yeah.
under the mixed use?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's okay.
So my thinking is if the project comes in, let's say we have a 20 acre, and there's a 20 acre, and they decide to add a phase 2 and make it 40 acres, which is still within, assuming those are the numbers we're going with, would they be required to, would they be able to have a second one of these as long as the, or would it be because it's a phased project, they'd be limited to the single one? What if they want to have 20 acres and now phase 2 as another, were they able to put another 25,000 square foot restaurant in phase 2?
I think the discussion, if I may, because Ralph and I talked about this with respect to the overall lot size, which we need to think outside of the box for. And then also, we spoke about the district being a certain size and perhaps a development within that district be a minimum of a certain size. So you could have perhaps a 40-acre district with a minimum of a 20-acre or a 35-acre district with a minimum of a 20-acre development within that district to sort of,
So how many developments can you have within a district?
well, see, that's it.
How many 20-acre parcels do you have?
Let's say you have 2.
You have two
Right.
20-acre parcels, and at 20 acres was the development, you
Right.
could have two developments.
All right, so if somebody-
Each development would
Right.
have a 25,000 square foot building and two 15,000.
All right, so
But if you have a
somebody-
35-acre parcel, for instance, with a minimum, do you develop the whole parcel, or do you start with 20 acres within?
That's a
and
great
then,
question.
And the whole focus of that conversation was to be receptive to economic conditions and not necessarily set someone up to fail. We want to see it succeed. So that's why we threw that out there as stuff to chat about.
All right.
In that section that we're talking about, 3.21, the reason in the edits from us, we added allowed uses. Based on the previous statement, shall be allowed uses as followed, and then allowed uses, it's just more, it just explains better, but it's not critical. That was just something we put in.
Through the chair.
Please.
Can you give me examples of what's required under a special permit for the first sentence?
Restaurants?
So the restaurants would have to have a special permit?
Massage parlor.
Dog grooming.
You mean anything that has to be,
Salon.
anything that's licensed?
No, we just have certain things where we require special permits, like restaurants and massage.
Where's that
Massage
list?
therapy.
In the table of
In
uses.
the table,
Okay.
yeah.
All right, that-
It'll say SP, and
Good.
then if it's checked it off,
Okay,
it'll have it.
as long as it's there.
Yep. Okay, so leave it, add the word allowed in front of,
Well, that was our suggestion, because, I would hope it would be understood that the uses that were proposed would be allowed within the district. I don't know how strongly you feel about it, Ralph. We talked about it, then sometimes you change your mind after you look at it a second time. So, it's not critical.
yeah, I wouldn't automatically just give them the word allowed in this thing. I would get rid of that.
Okay, just use uses.
Yeah, uses is fine.
That's fine.
All right, the next one, total gross floor area devoted to commercial and business use or uses shall not be less than 5 nor exceed 15% of the total gross floor area of the mixed-use development. All right, not the land area, the gross floor area is what just to make sure everyone's clear on that.
Well,
I think we talked last time
Yeah.
about making the number more like 20%, unless I'm missing, and the
No.
cap being 30.
Yep.
Any other comment on that?
No, I would go between 20 and 30, not 5 and 15. That would be my thought.
Okay. And we're using the total gross floor area,
So it's irregardless of floors,
right?
which covers that.
Okay.
If I may, Don.
Mhm.
In my letter, I think I referenced it. Some of the other, towns, you're looking at like 5 to 10%, and, I know John can say, like, through a lot of his developments that are this size, between 3, which is small, right, but 10%. So, I get, like, maybe 5% is, not a minimum you're okay with, that the town's okay with. But I think if you're looking at 30%, 20 to 30%, that is really high.
Okay. We'll read your comments, and
Okay.
we'll have time at the next meeting to respond, unless you have like an addendum after tonight's meeting, this afternoon's meeting.
Okay.
What time
You're
is
like,
it?
what time is it?
Yeah, it's afternoon, it's 12:25.
All right, thank
That's
you.
right. Okay.
Chair, just-
Before,
oh,
go ahead, Connie
just quick,
first.
so you're referring to section 3.22.
Correct.
So the planning board spent quite a bit of time on this particular section, and Tide Richards is a developer with Forest Park Development, O'Connell and Sons, and the planning board paid heed to his comment, and those were actually his
numbers?
suggestions.
Okay. I think a lot of it also, we're gonna get to a point about integration. I think the percentages, I would say that if you're building, and this is just me talking, let's say you're putting this in at Fenway Golf, and you're surrounded by residential. Maybe the numbers can be slightly different versus putting it in the heart of our industrial or commercial sections. Because I think part of this will be speaking of having it in harmony or integration with the abutting properties and stuff, okay? So, but we'll talk about that in a moment. Okay, density and dimensional.
Can I
Yeah.
wanted to, before we rush off, in addition to 3.22, I would like to see any phasing of a development shall include the required minimum ratio of non-residential to residential uses. In other words, if you're only going to develop a third of the product, the proposal at a time, that there needs to be the required ratio, the minimum required ratio. So if we're talking 5%, there needs to be 5%. If we're talking 20%, there needs to be 20%. Is that fair?
Yeah, as long
That- I
as,
mean, to
so
me
if they
that-
did 30%, add a new phase, and aggregating that new phase, it brings you to, say, 20%, that's fine, you don't have to add any more. But if it creates the new phase brings it down to 15%, assuming we're going with the 20% number.
See, what I'm trying to avoid is the residential piece going in en masse and the commercial piece coming later,
Right.
or the non-residential piece coming later.
Well, I think the commercial allocation should go to, for the special permit and site plan should be up front. They may have,
Well,
tenant to be determined, so we don't know whether, if they put a restaurant in there, restaurants can require even more parking, then,
Well,
I think what it is just, we want to make sure that if they say, okay, here's a 20-acre development, we're going to start with this section here, that it's evenly split up, whatever the percentage is. So if they're going to do, we don't want to see them build 400 houses and have no commercial aspect, and then all of a sudden, something happens,
and then phase two is where we're gonna put all the commercial in.
assuming that
Right.
it goes to phase two,
Right,
what
it's all
happens
about
if they build
protection.
400 units?
It's all about
And
protection.
they go belly up?
Right, so you keep it under the keep the mixed use ratios at or higher or no lower than, even including phases. Yeah. So in other words, you can't come in right in the first phase and say, this is the residential phase, and we're gonna do 100% residential, but when we get to phase two, we're gonna go and add, the percentage so that it'll all come together at 20%. It has to be right from the onset, there should be a commercial and business component in even phase one, correct?
And I would expect that phase one would probably have a streetscape of just that, commercial and residential, to get that sort of concept moving. However, I'm not the developer, so.
Can I ask John a question?
Absolutely.
John, when you've built these other projects that you've shown us, how do you typically have the business and resident and component right from the onset? Like, here's where a restaurant's gonna be, here's where this is gonna be, or do you just build residential and then add it at the end?
No, we start with both product types.
Okay,
I'd envision we'd have a mixed-use building in the front, and then maybe a residential phase in the back that we're going concurrently.
mhm,
And again, because you have mixed use, you have residential units that are above the commercial.
Right.
So
So,
it's-
as I've said to the planning board many times, the commercial becomes an amenity that you're kind of filling in as you need it. Getting the right tenants, I was just saying to Jane, we really need a breakfast joint in town. There's no place to get an omelet.
Coffee time.
But, to try and,
Coughlin's.
but yeah, we would typically have the mixed use components coming on the same time as the residential components.
Okay.
But the phasing language that
Okay.
Ralph used that's great.
good.
All right, okay, move to the next one? All right. 4, density and dimensional regulations, I don't see any changes there. 4.1, the minimum parcel size for a mixed-use development mixed-use development shall be what?
All right, this is an area where you've got some notes that we need to sort of just start from the beginning and disregard, because when Ralph and I talked about it, we were looking at creating the district of a 40-acre district like we've suggested before, and if the developer wanted to start off smaller with a 20-acre development within, that would be fine, from a cost perspective. Our concern at 20 acres was that, especially if we're looking at reducing the commercial component, we're looking at potentially large residential developments in other areas in town. We've got 400 acres on the market. We have to think outside the box what kind of an impact this could have on our ability to provide service to our community. And so that's why we were thinking more of a 40-acre parcel. Do you agree?
Yes.
All right, so again, we're talking a village here too, we're not talking.
Well, and the village makes more sense at 40
Yeah,
acres.
now that we're thinking village, at 40 acres makes more sense for the village as opposed to having small 20-acre. So 40 acres is the minimum?
Well, that's what,
Yeah.
Yep. Okay.
are you okay with that?
Absolutely.
All
So
right.
Don, with that being said, 40 acres is the minimum. I'm gonna switch back to the size of the building.
Mm-hmm.
They're only allowed one building 25,000 square feet on that 40-acre parcel.
Okay.
Where before, if it was a 20-acre development, then they would have all been allowed two.
Right.
So it's something to think about, and like I said, do you wanna,
Now, here's the question. If they put in these building requirements of one and so forth, and let's say it's still 20%, will these building size still allow them to comply with the 20%? Or are they just by definition not gonna be allowed to put these, or just have a bunch of small 10,000 square foot buildings? Or units or businesses?
I didn't follow that.
Okay, all right, you can only do 40 acre piece, you can have 125,000
Or
square foot.
215.
Or 215.
Right, okay.
Or quite a few 10,000s, okay?
yeah.
Right,
All
right.
right, so those limitations, now that's bumped up to 40 acres, would not preclude them from getting the 20% ratio, if that's what we're going with, right?
Correct.
Okay, good, that's all I was just checking, make sure that you'll say, well, I put one in here, I put another one here, I'm still gonna be at 10%. How do I get the 20? That's what I was going with, these numbers still work with that.
Yes.
Okay, good. That's
I
what
mean, the 20% is no different whether you do two developments of 20 acres each next to each other.
No, I'm just
It's
saying,
still
whether to get 20%, they need two 25,000s to get to the 20%. They don't, they can do a 25, okay. All right.
Because they would be separate developments.
Well, through the chair, it also says, I was just mentioned, the 125,000 is allowed in addition to uses up to a maximum of 15,000.
Exactly.
And a whole bunch of 10,000s.
Right.
Up to 10.
Right, so there's a lot of opportunity for some
Okay.
bigger
Or
commercial
smaller.
areas.
Or smaller.
Yeah.
All right. The maximum density of housing units shall be 12, am I missing a letter or missing something?
It said, you're missing, it said shall 12 per acre.
Shall 12 per acre, based on the area of the entire parcel. All right? All right, what are your thoughts on that? 12 enough, too much, too little, too high?
I think, through the chair, we need to be consistent with the language. I mean, we talked about mixed-use district and then the mixed-use development within a mixed-use district, and now we're calling it.
The area, but that was our discussion.
Yeah.
The mixed-use development within the mixed-use district is sort of, we've created a 40-acre district. And what we're talking about now, what can go within that 40-acre district.
Right.
And,
Well, that's okay. What I'm questioning is, we now call it a development.
that was.
That's their.
Well, that's,
Yeah.
exactly. I mean,
Okay.
a district is like a residential A district, it could be 1,000 acres. The development is what's being built within that district. What our thought is, because there is no district right now for mixed use, say, hey, you have to at least have a 40-acre area to do it. Like I said, it's one of those where if the development's gonna be 40 acres, it's pretty much,
Right, but the other word that was used was entire parcel, so
yeah.
I'm better with the development, but parcel, I don't think fits.
All right, so you want to.
Semantics.
And so how many per acre? 12 is fine? 8, 10, 15?
Okay, a 40-acre parcel,
480.
true, but that's just by itself. You know, I'm just trying to envision what we would be talking about. Ralph's gonna turn on his computer brain. Yeah, in terms of the impact. You know, we started with 800. We started with 800, which is amazing.
It's hard to envision something that size. I'm trying to think of the luxury apartments that are just over the line in Enfield.
Mayfair Place.
And how many
Mayfield.
units are in there for the size of that?
I know they're expanding right now, they're building more.
I want to say, the last I knew, it was a total of 370 units, I believe, total, that were going to be built in there.
How big
And the
is their
first
lot?
phase was 170, but I don't know the size of the lot.
Connie, do you have any connections with the planners of Enfield?
I could call them.
If you could find
Oh,
out
so
what
you-
that Mayfield project
Oh,
is like.
Mayfield?
Yeah, to see how many area, you know, what their density is. So
I'm just trying to get a general
we're
feel
trying to get a
for
visual
how many
for
acres.
it.
And again, obviously, it's gonna change, because if we have a 3-story building that has apartments in it, that's gonna take up a lot smaller area than all individual units.
And you know, while we brought up that particular development, and it's over the state line, so it's a Connecticut development, there are some negative, some negative circumstances that have occurred with the result of that development to the surrounding Long Meadow, in terms of the neighborhoods that were, now their backyards are just a 2-story building. And you can see it from the road, there's not even a buffer in place. So this tells me that within our community, within our established neighborhoods, that while this is a welcome use, we have to be sensitive to what's around us. Now, if we're dealing with a parcel in 330 Chestnut, we need to give them protection too, because they're right in the middle of the industrial zone.
Yeah.
So there needs to be that benefit, but as to, you know, that's another story. But you brought up Mayfair Place, and that's the one negative to me, is how they
Yeah, there's
didn't
no
buffer
buffer.
it. They didn't buffer it.
All right,
So, through the chair,
please.
we've been going 2 hours.
Yeah, I know, you have to get, we all have to go. You guys are, we'll try to keep meetings at, no, I mean, we're halfway done, but I think there's a lot of fresh brain that we need for the next time. Is this a good time for in a couple weeks?
It works for me.
For you all?
At 10:30?
Yeah,
Sure.
okay, all right, I think at this point,
2
I
weeks?
think we're right about the halfway point
that
of
would
the
be the,
document, which
so
is great.
we will continue, plus it gives us a chance to read the report and do
You
some
know,
more.
this is a great room.
Yeah, I think we want you, would we be able to have this room again?
October 7th?
October, right, Columbus is the following Monday, right?
Yes.
Yeah,
Okay.
October 7.
All right. We're checking right now to see if but it's a good time, maybe, we'll keep it at 2 hours
That would
because,
work, because I can't do the following Monday, it's opening a deer season.
and it's Columbus Day.
I'm sorry.
Yes.
You have to surrender your
Yes.
weapons.
All right,
Okay?
So we stopped basically after the 40-acre parcel. We haven't
Yeah.
made a decision about
actually,
the
I'm
density.
gonna reel back on that, I think we're, at the next meeting,
We'll start at number
we're
4.
gonna review, so I'm gonna go back
Yep.
to I'm gonna continue probably at section 4.
4.
reserving all rights, and if I
Okay.
want to go back to it.
Okay, that's fine.
So
Because
that'll
when
be
we
for the
read
next
James' comments, we may want to look.
Let me look at my
some
calendar to
substance.
make sure I don't have an obvious conflict on that time, but I do not think so.
Seventh works.
Checking. Disbursement, right now the 7th is clean for me at that time.
We all set?
Yes.
We are. I'm just gonna close the meeting once we schedule a time and a place everybody knows. We good?
Just gotta check.
All right.
There was something on there, but it may not be this one.
Okay. What I'll do is I'll close the meeting. I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Motion made, motion
Second.
seconded. And our hope is to meet here in 2 weeks at 10:30 on, what is it, the 7th. All right, thank you.
Thank
All
you.
those in favor?
Aye.